You wake up before the alarm goes off, not because you are rested, because something inside you would not allow sleep to run its course. You lie there for a few seconds, the ceiling above, the silence around you, and before any word, before any thought takes shape, the feeling is already there, a pressure, vague, heavy, without a clear address, but present everywhere at once. You have not yet opened your eyes to the day, and the day is already pressing on your chest. You get up. You follow the same sequence you have been following for months: water, light, mirror. And for 1 second, just 1 second, you look at your own reflection and ask yourself a question you will not answer out loud. Is this it? Not about the day that is beginning. About everything. You close the question before it opens completely, and you keep going. Because keeping going is what you do. Because stopping feels more dangerous than moving forward. Because the pressure you carry has no name, no origin, no locatable cure, and that somehow makes everything worse. You are not depressed. You are not ungrateful. You have things. You have built things. Some days are even good, but the anxiety does not go away. It only changes shape. Sometimes it is urgency, sometimes it is emptiness, sometimes it is a diffuse guilt for not doing more, being more, feeling more satisfaction than you actually feel. If you clicked on this video, it was because you felt something in the title, not curiosity, recognition. And recognition means this: what I'm going to describe here is not news to you. It already lives inside you. We are simply going to give it a name. You are not broken. That is the first thing that needs to be said. And it needs to be said plainly, because self-help has made that sentence almost meaningless. I am not going to tell you everything is going to be fine. Everything is not fine. That is exactly why you are here. What I'm going to show you is something more useful than comfort. I'm going to show you that what you feel is not random, not personal, not a sign of weakness or failure. It is a structural mechanism, a feature of existence, not a defect in your individual psychology. Millions of people wake up to the same ceiling, the same silence, the same pressure without a clear address. Productive people, intelligent people, people who, on the outside, seem to have everything under control. Anxiety does not choose by merit. It does not respect achievement. It does not go away when you earn more, accomplish more, rest more. Because it was never about what you have or do not have. It was always about something much older, something that Sartre named, and that almost nobody wants to hear. Let us be precise about what this pressure actually feels like, because vagueness is the enemy of understanding. It is not sadness. Sadness has an object. You lose something, you grieve, it has form, it has contours. This does not. It is not fear either. Fear points to something specific, a threat you can name, a scenario you can picture. This is different. It is fear without an object. Anxiety about nothing in particular. Anxiety about everything at once. You finish something that mattered to you, a project, a goal, a phase of life. The relief lasts maybe a day, maybe a weekend. Then the old pressure returns, sometimes heavier than before, because now there is no visible target left to blame. You make plans to feel better. You add structure. You cut out distractions. Sometimes it works for a week, sometimes for 3 days. Then you wake up again to the ceiling and the silence and the question you keep asking only halfway. You look at the people around you and wonder, is everyone carrying this? Are they just better at hiding it? Or did they find something I have not found yet? Or, and this is the thought you rarely let finish, is there nothing to find? That incomplete thought, that suspended question, that is exactly where Sartre begins. What if anxiety is not a problem to be solved? What if it is information, precise, relentless, structurally inevitable, about the nature of what you are? What if the pressure you feel every morning is not a symptom of a broken life? What if it is proof of an intact one? That question sounds wrong. It should, because everything you have ever heard about anxiety tells you to reduce it, manage it, overcome it. But what if that entire set of instructions is built on a faulty diagnosis? What Sartre revealed in dense, difficult, almost brutal philosophical language was this: anxiety is not the enemy of a free person. Anxiety is the price of freedom itself, and that changes everything. In 1943, in Paris under Nazi occupation, a French philosopher published a book of nearly 800 pages that almost nobody expected to read, and that ended up reformulating how Western thought understands what a human being is. The book was called Being and Nothingness. The philosopher was Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre was not writing self-help. He was not offering comfort. He was doing something far more uncomfortable. He was dismantling every structure human beings use to escape responsibility for their own existence. God, nature, destiny, character, creation, society. One by one, Sartre removed all of them from the equation, not to be cruel, but because he believed with surgical precision that as long as any one of those structures remained standing, human beings could use it as an excuse. And when you remove all the excuses, what is left? You. Only you. Radically, completely, inescapably you. And the feeling that produces, the feeling of standing in an open field with nothing to hold on to, nothing above that determined who you are, nothing ahead that was decided before you arrived. Sartre called that feeling angoisse, anguish, existential anxiety, not the anxiety of a sick person, the anxiety of a free one. This is where everything becomes concrete. Sartre made a distinction that cuts through nearly everything modern culture tells you about identity. He said, existence precedes essence. 4 words, enormous consequences. What does that mean in practice? A hammer is defined before it exists. Someone decides this object will be for driving nails. The function, the essence, comes first. The object comes after. Most of human history has operated under the assumption that people work the same way. God created you with a purpose. Nature gave you a role. The universe has a plan for you. Your essence, what you are for, was decided before you arrived. Sartre said, no. You arrived first, then you decide what you are. There is no pre-written role. There is no cosmic job description. There is no essential self waiting to be discovered. You are not born with a nature. You build one through your choices, your actions, your refusals. Now stop here, because this sounds liberating, almost beautiful. But feel what it actually demands. If there is no pre-written nature, then nothing you do is inevitable. Every choice you make, every single one, is genuine, entirely yours. You cannot point to your personality and say, this is just how I am. You cannot point to the past and say, this is why I act this way. You cannot point to circumstance and say, I had no choice. Because for Sartre, the human being is condemned to choose. Even choosing not to choose is a choice. Even staying the same is a choice made continuously, every day, renewed in every moment you do not change. Feel the weight of that. That weight has a name. It is the weight you wake up with. Most people imagine that anxiety comes from restriction, from being trapped, blocked, pressured by external forces. Sartre diagnosed the opposite. Anxiety comes from openness, from the radical awareness that nothing is fixed, nothing has been decided, nothing is guaranteed. You are standing at the edge of a cliff, not in danger of being pushed, but in full awareness that you could jump. That awareness itself, not the danger, but the freedom, is what produces the vertigo. You feel anxious, not because your life is too limited. You feel anxious because it is too open. And nobody warned you that freedom feels exactly like free fall. You finish something, a goal, a phase, a version of yourself that took effort to become. And almost immediately, the feeling of insufficiency returns. You assumed this was a problem with your ambition, your discipline, your gratitude. It was not. Sartre's framework reveals the mechanism. The human being is a being who is always ahead of itself. You are never simply what you are. You are always also what you are not yet. what you could be, what you chose not to be. That gap between what you are and what you are not never closes. It is not a deficit. It is the structure of consciousness itself. Permanent insufficiency is not a wound. It is the signature of a being that is free, and no achievement will close it, because closing it would require you to stop being human. Sartre had a name for the strategies people use to escape the weight of freedom. He called it bad faith, mauvaise foi. Bad faith is not lying to others, it is lying to yourself about the nature of your own freedom. It takes dozens of forms. You say, "I have no choice." But you do. You simply prefer not to pay the price of the choice you are not going to make. You say, "This is just who I am." But you chose over and over to act that way until it became habit. You say, "It is the way I was raised." But you have had decades since your upbringing to choose differently, and in each one of those moments you chose continuity. Bad faith is not stupidity. It is a completely understandable survival strategy, because fully accepting your own freedom is genuinely terrifying. If you are completely free, you are completely responsible. No external structure absorbs the weight. No circumstance explains the life you have built. And that is why bad faith is so seductive, and why it never truly works. The anxiety returns precisely because, at some level, you know you are free, you know you are responsible, and bad faith is nothing more than a temporary shelter over that knowledge. Now let us go deeper, because what Sartre reveals goes beyond individual psychology. There is a cultural machine operating on top of this existential structure, and it uses your anxiety as fuel. Here is how it works. The human being, as Sartre described, is constitutively insufficient, always ahead of itself, always aware of the gap between what it is and what it could be. A culture built on consumption, performance, and comparison discovered that gap and colonized it. Not accidentally, structurally. Think about how the metrics of a life are built today. You can measure your reach, your output, your rankings, your status relative to others. At every level, there is a higher level in plain sight. With every achievement, a new benchmark appears. The horizon never arrives, because the horizon is the product. Byung-Chul Han, the contemporary philosopher who diagnosed this dynamic with the greatest precision, describes the modern individual as a self-exploiting subject. Not a slave forced to produce, a free person who voluntarily, enthusiastically, chronically overproduces, because the culture has successfully fused the individual's desire for meaning with the system's demand for output. You do not push yourself because someone is forcing you. You push yourself because you have internalized the logic that your value is produced, not inherent. That sufficiency is earned, not given. That stillness is failure in disguise. And this is where Sartre and Han converge on something almost unbearable to look at directly. The anxiety you feel every morning is not only existential, it has been amplified and weaponized by a culture that profits from your permanent sense of inadequacy. Sartre revealed the raw mechanism. Freedom produces anguish. The culture discovered the mechanism and built an entire economy around it. Your anguish is not only your condition, it is also your product. Here is what you were never told. The insufficiency you feel is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence of your freedom. These are the same thing, experienced from two different vantage points. From the inside, without the structural diagnosis, the permanent gap looks like personal failure, as if you were behind, as if everyone else had arrived somewhere you have not. With the structural diagnosis, you see what is actually happening. You are a being who cannot not be free, cannot be defined in advance, cannot be finished, cannot be sufficient in a final, permanent, reassuring sense, because sufficiency would require your freedom to stop operating, and your freedom never stops. The anxiety you carry every morning is not a malfunction. It is the system working exactly as it was designed. The design is not broken. You are not broken. But here comes the unbearable part, the part that genuinely changes how you see. Knowing this does not make the anxiety disappear. Sartre never promised it would. Understanding that anguish is the price of freedom does not refund the price. You still wake up to the ceiling. You still feel the pressure before the first word of the day. What changes is this. You stop fighting the wrong enemy. You stop treating your own consciousness, your own freedom, your own irreducible responsibility for your existence as the problem to be solved. And you begin to see, with growing precision, the architecture of the world that surrounds that freedom, the structures, the mechanisms, the invisible hands that found your anguish and monetized it before you even knew its name. That shift from inner wound to structural diagnosis is what Sartre called lucidity, not happiness, not peace, lucidity, the precise, uncomfortable and irreversible capacity to see the code that was always operating. Let us name what has been uncovered here with the precision it deserves. You arrived in the world without instructions, without a pre-written nature, without a cosmic role, without an essential self delivered at birth. You are existence before essence, which means you are what you make of yourself in every choice, in every refusal, in every moment of action or inaction. That radical openness, which should be the most liberating fact about you, is also the source of a permanent structural anxiety that no achievement, no relationship, no belief system will ever completely dissolve. Because Sartre was right about something that is deeply uncomfortable to accept. Anguish is not a phase, it is a feature. It is the awareness of freedom, the perception that nothing in you is fixed, the vertigo of standing on open ground with no predetermined direction and total responsibility for where you go. And then, layered on top of that raw existential condition, a culture that discovered your anguish and built a commerce around it. That whispers from every direction, you are not enough yet. That projects the horizon to remain permanently beyond your reach. That monetizes the gap between what you are and what you could be, and calls that gap potential, ambition, growth. You were carrying two things you thought were one, the existential weight, inherent structural human, the cultural amplification, manufactured, strategic, profitable. Seeing these two as separate mechanisms is the first precision this video can give you. Now look back at the morning. You woke up before the alarm, ceiling above, pressure already present. That pressure is not a flaw in your psychology. It is not evidence of a life poorly lived. It is not a sign that you chose wrong, built wrong, or are wrong. It is the specific feeling of being a free being in a world that offers no pre-written script. Sartre described it in Paris, 1943, surrounded by occupation and collapse. And what he found in that extreme context was something universally true. The human condition is not tragic because life is hard. It is tragic and unworthy because we are inescapably responsible for what we do with it. Every person who ever woke up to the same pressure you feel was carrying the same structure. The poet who could not explain his own sadness on quiet mornings. The surgeon who, after the most successful operation of his career, felt an emptiness where triumph should have been. The athlete at the peak of everything she trained to become, looking at the medal and feeling not satisfaction, but the immediate awareness of what comes next. Not because any of them failed, because all of them were free. And freedom does not feel like victory. Freedom feels like responsibility that never ends. That is not a flaw in the design. That is the design. Sartre offers no relief. I'm not going to offer any either. What has been offered here is something different and more durable than relief. A structural diagnosis. The anxiety you carry has been named. Its mechanism has been mapped. The existential layer, freedom producing anguish as inevitably as fire produces heat. The cultural layer, a system that found that anguish and built an architecture of permanent insufficiency around it, so that your most human characteristic could be turned into a market. Now you see the code, not the code of your personal psychology, but the code of the system that has been operating on your most intimate experiences without your consent or awareness. The question I leave you with is not, what are you going to do now? That would be prescription, and prescription is not what this is for. The question is more unsettling than that. Now that you can see both mechanisms, the existential anguish that is yours alone and the cultural machine that borrowed it without asking, can you still look at the pressure you feel every morning the same way? Can you still treat your own freedom as the enemy? Or does something change, quietly, irreversibly, in how you understand the weight you have been carrying? Sartre did not ask us to feel better. He asked us to see clearly. The clarity is yours now. What you carry with it is, as it always was, entirely your choice. And that, the inescapable nature of that choice, is exactly where the anguish begins, and also where the only honest relationship with your own existence becomes possible. This is antidote philosophy, not solutions, not transformation, not a manual for becoming a better version of yourself. Systematic dismantling of the invisible structures that operate on your life, so that, at the very least, you can see them operating. Sartre saw them in 1943, writing in a city under occupation, surrounded by the most extreme version of human unfreedom. And he still concluded, the only thing that cannot be taken from a human being is the freedom to choose how to respond to what is done to them. That is the heaviest gift ever given. If what has been revealed here produced a discomfort you want to keep thinking about, if you want to keep seeing the code, leave in the comments what the weight you carry feels like to you. Not for catharsis, for precision. Because the more precisely we name what we feel, the harder it becomes to pretend we do not feel it. That is the beginning of lucidity. Not the end of anxiety, the beginning of seeing it for what it truly is.